Hello and good morning dear students and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let us take a look at the articles we have for today's Hindu news analysis. So in the detailed section we have four very important articles. The first article is related to the recently held India-ASEAN Summit, where PM Modi attended the summit that was held in the country of Indonesia. Here, Mr. Modi, he presented a 12-point proposal to expand the relationships, the engagements between the ASEAN group as well as India. The second article is regarding linguistic diversity of the world. Many of the languages of the world, they are disappearing. What are the reasons for this? And what impact can that have on the world? We'll take a look at that. We'll also, within this particular topic, also take a look at the various provisions in the Constitution of India that help in protection of the minority languages. Then, India-South Korea or Republic of Korea. So, Korea, we have South Korea, which is also known as Republic of Korea. We have North Korea, which is known as Democratic People's Republic of Korea. In this article, we'll be talking about how India and South Korea, they are at a place where they can in an exemplary manner increase the engagement between the both countries. The last one in the detailed analysis, the last article is regarding the latest guidelines by the Reserve Bank of India regarding lending, regarding the rates at which money is being lent to the borrowers by the lenders. What are these guidelines? What are the various impacts that these guidelines will have? We'll take a look at that. Now, this particular article, it is not just necessary for your UPSC journey, it is also essential for your financial literacy. Okay, so take a note of this as well. Then in the prelims bite section, we have three articles. First, the stage is set to bring in African Union as a member of G20. Whether or not it will become G21 after this inclusion, that is something that we'll have to see. The next article is Delhi may turn as a venue to revive the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which was recently cancelled on July 17th, 2023. So the United Nations General Secretary, Mr. Antonio Guterres, as well as the President of Turkey, the Foreign Secretary of Russia, leaders of European Union and other members of United Nations, all are trying to revive this particular deal to bring inflation, especially food inflation, in control. So what is this particular initiative? We'll take a look at that. And in the last article, in the prelim bite section, what is heat index? How is it different from normal temperature that we see? And what impact can heat index have on our health? How heat index, knowledge of heat index is important to know how heat can affect human health. So let's start with our first article. There is an India-ASEAN Summit that concluded yesterday. It is an annual summit. Summit means the heads of the state, they attend this particular meeting. So that is the meaning of summit. So it was held in the country of Indonesia, where various discussions were held regarding increasing the engagement between India as well as the ASEAN countries. As a part of that, our Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, he gave a 12-point plan or 12-point proposal to increase this engagement. Now, what are all of these 12 points? What will be the benefits of these 12 points? We'll take a look at that. Now, this particular article does not include all the 12 points as point-wise, as bullets. It also does not include what will be the benefits. It does not clearly include the benefit of all the points, okay? So, please be careful while I talk about this, because here we have also included what will be the benefits of every point that has been given by our Prime Minister. See, the aim of this is to strengthen the cooperation between ASEAN as a group as well as India in multiple sectors, okay, beyond economy. Beyond economic engagement. We want to increase our engagement not just in economic sphere. We want to increase it in social sphere, in environmental sphere, in strategic sphere. So what are all these points? See, the first is we want to establish a multimodal. That means multiple modes of transportation like ships, like trains, like roads, that will include both simple vehicles as well as passenger vehicles and freight vehicles, okay. So we want to establish a multimodal connectivity and an economic corridor that will link Southeast Asia, India, West Asia as well as Europe. So this entire region, we want to link it through a multimodal connectivity route. Now something that is similar to this, what China is doing is what? BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative of China. So through this cooperation, we want to counter China's influence with regards to connectivity. See, already a lot of ASEAN countries are a part of BRI, but there are certain problems associated with that. Many ASEAN countries, they have certain disputes, territorial disputes with China. There is also problem of debt diplomacy that China is often accused of using against other countries, okay. So in background of that, India's initiative of bringing in this connectivity project, it will be very essential. The second is we want to offer these ASEAN partners our digital public infrastructure stack, which includes all this. Our UPI system, IMPS system, eKYC, Aadhaar Pay, Bharat QR, and these things, okay. So what will it help in? One, it will help in improving what? Financial inclusion. Also, it will help in improving the interoperability between Indian businesses and the consumers of these ASEAN countries and vice versa. Also, the Indian community that is living in these ASEAN countries, they will be easily able to send money to houses, which will help in improving remittances to India. So a dual benefit, not just for India, but also for the ASEAN countries. The third is, we want to establish an ASEAN-India Fund for Digital Future, which will focus on cooperation between the two entities in digital transformation and financial connectivity. See, we want to do this because technology, digital technology, it is improving with leaps and bounds, okay? So we do not want to stay behind the other countries. So we want to cooperate with each other. ASEAN has a very high capacity for hardware development. India has a very high capacity for software development. So we want to come together and we want to work together in order to improve our knowledge regarding these future digital technologies. Next, we want to renew the support of Economic and Research Institute of ASEAN and East Asia. So this will again help in improving the economic relationships, the trade relationships between India and the ASEAN countries. Next, there is a call amongst these 12 points, there is a call for collectively raising issues that are being faced by the global south in the multilateral forums. Multilateral forums like United Nations, like WTO, like G20 and so on. See, ASEAN as a group has more than 650 million of population. India is already the most populous country of the world. We have a population of 1.4 billion. So together, we make up a major chunk of the global population, right? More than 2 billion people live in India plus ASEAN combined. So the issues of these 2 billion people, if they are raised together at global platforms, then that will help in improving the status of these people, the status of the global south, the developing, the underdeveloped world as well. Also, there is an invitation to the ASEAN countries to join the recently announced Global Center for Traditional Medicine that is being established by the World Health Organization in India, okay, in Gujarat, Jamnagar district. See, Southeast Asia, it is already known for its rich traditional medicine practices. India is also known for that. We want to come together along with the other nations of the world in order to enhance the use of these traditional medicines. So for that, WHO is establishing this center, and we want ASEAN to be a part of this because owing to its rich cultural and medical traditions. Next, there is a call for ASEAN and India to work together with regards to Mission Life. What is Mission Life? Which was proposed by India. Lifestyle for environment. Every individual should adopt a lifestyle which is close to environment, which brings least damage to the environment. All of us, we want to come together. ASEAN, India, they should come together to achieve the goals of Mission Life in order to reduce the human impact on environment, to reduce the impact of climate change. So if 2 billion, more than 2 billion population, it comes together for this purpose, the impact would be huge. Next, India also, as a part of social cooperation, India wants to share its experience with the ASEAN countries regarding provisioning of affordable and quality medicines to the people. We are doing it through what? The Jan Aushadhi Kendras. See, already India is a champion of generic medicines. Owing to our patent laws, we are already exporting a lot of pharmaceuticals to many countries across the world. Many developing countries, they are being benefited by India's export to these countries, right? So India wants to share this entire experience of providing affordable drugs to the people through such kendras to the ASEAN countries. This will help in improving the inclusive health aspect of development in the ASEAN countries. Next, there is a call to fight together against terrorism, terror financing and cyber disinformation, which the entire world is experiencing. Okay, so this is one of the most significant challenge that is in front of the world. India wants to work together with ASEAN to counter this particular issue. Next, point 10 and point 11. They are quite similar, related to what? Disaster management. Point 10 states that India invites ASEAN countries to join the coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure. The infrastructure that is being built, it should be built in such a manner that it is resistant to any future disasters. Under that, the Sendai framework, it also called for what? Build Back Better initiative. So India wants ASEAN to join the coalition for disaster resilient infrastructure. Apart from that, there is also a call to increase cooperation between India and ASEAN in disaster management. See, both India as well as ASEAN, they are in disaster prone regions. India lies at the foothills of Himalayas, which is a very sensitive earthquake prone zone. Many of the ASEAN countries, they lie where? Along the circum-Pacific ring of fire. Apart from that, due to climate change again, both India as well as the ASEAN countries, they have increased risks regarding the climatological disasters. So it is essential that we share the knowledge, we share the best practices amongst each other in order to improve the lives of the people against these disasters. And the last point is, we are calling ASEAN to establish enhanced cooperation on maritime safety, security and domain awareness. Now this again is very important, especially to check what? To check the hegemony of China in South China Sea. Many of the ASEAN countries, they have disputed territories in the South China Sea with China. China, it is trying to manipulate these countries through its military dominance. It is trying to manipulate these countries into giving up these territories to China. So, India wants ASEAN to cooperate with India so that we can establish maritime safety, security and domain awareness in the Indo-Pacific region. Also, apart from this, what did our Prime Minister say? See, while addressing East Asia Summit, he talked about the code of conduct for South China Sea. He said that the code of conduct in South China Sea should be compliant with UN clause, that is United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea. So any kind of activity that goes on in the South China Sea, the establishment of EEZ, exclusive economic zones, it should be done in compliance with what UN Convention on Law of Sea states. Now, why is this statement so important? Recently, if you all remember, China released a map, an official map of China, which included a significant amount of territories of the South China Sea, many of which are disputed. It also included Arunachal Pradesh as well as parts of Union Territory of Leh and Ladakh. Moreover, China is also against India holding any kind of G20 related meetings in Arunachal Pradesh. So this is a joint problem that is being faced by both India as well as the ASEAN countries, the problem with China. Now China is not respecting the territorial integrity of India. It is not respecting the territorial integrity of many of the ASEAN countries. So that is why we all need to come together in order to fight this hegemony of China through diplomatic channels. So this is about this first article, which is regarding the 12-point proposal by PM Modi. Also, this particular address by PM Modi regarding upholding the spirit of UNCLOS in the South China Sea. The next article is regarding disappearing languages. See, any language according to UNESCO, any language that has less than 10,000 native speakers. What is native speaker? That means a person whose mother tongue is that language. For example, if my mother tongue is Hindi, that means I am a native speaker of Hindi. So according to UNESCO, if any language has less than 10,000 native speakers, that makes that particular language an endangered language. There are many languages in the world that are endangered right now. In fact, according to certain studies, some of the languages, they have only one native speaker. Almost a dozen of such languages have only one native speaker. So if that particular speaker, that particular person, they die off, then that language will also go extinct. Okay. So what is this extinction of language? According to a UNESCO report, when we talk about India, 42 languages in India, they are heading toward extinction. They are already endangered and they are now heading towards an extinction. Most of these languages, please note, they belong to indigenous tribal groups. Now, many of these languages, they do not have any kind of written script. They are only oral in nature. So, because there is no written script, once the native speakers, they all perish, the language will go away. It will be wiped off from the pages of history. We do not have any kind of written records of that language, okay? At a global scale, 7,000 distinct languages, they are spoken as mother tongue across the world. Now, according to a research which the writer of this article is focusing upon, this research was published in the Economic Journal. According to this research, 40% of the languages with less than 35,000 native speakers, they will go extinct within 1,000 years. 40% of the languages, almost 2,800 languages. They might go, sorry, not this figure. Almost 40% of languages which have less than 35,000 speakers, not 40% of entirety, but 40% of this, they will go extinct within the next 100 years. So what is the bottom line? Linguistic diversity of the world, it is shrinking at a rapid rate. According to the Index of Linguistic Diversity, what it is, we'll take a look in the next slide. According to this index, between the years 1970 to 2005, global linguistic diversity, it declined by 20%, by 1/5. Also, according to Linguistic Society of America, which is a society which is working very hard in conserving these languages by making their audios, by making their videos, by writing the knowledge down, this particular society, according to them, dozens of languages today have only one living native speaker. So as I said, if the speaker, they perish, then this language will stop to exist at all. So what is this linguistic diversity index that we were talking about? See, linguistic diversity index, it is basically a probability. Now, probability of anything, it belongs between 0 to 1. You must have read during your CSAT preparation, right? Probability is always between 0 to 1. 0 means 0% probability. 1 means 100% probability. So, linguistic diversity index, it's the probability that any two people selected from a population at random will have different mother tongues. Okay, so if they are choosing me and you, my mother tongue is Hindi, your mother tongue might be Tamil. So that means there is 100% probability that any two people that are chosen, if the population is just two people, that any person chosen, they will have different mother tongues. At a wider population scale, it ranges from 0 to 1. So countries that have people with smaller number of mother tongues or mother languages, they'll definitely have a lower linguistic diversity index, because less number of mother tongues, that means there is a higher probability that the people, two people chosen randomly, they'll have same language. That means lower probability that they'll have different mother tongue. So that means the countries that have people with smaller number of mother languages have lower linguistic diversity index compared to countries that have larger number of mother tongues. There will be more diversity in the countries with larger number of mother tongues. For India, this linguistic diversity is quite high. This index lies at 0.93. The countries with lowest ranking, lowest index, this is not a rank as such. So the countries with lower LDI, lowest LDI include Haiti, for which it is 0, Cuba and Samoa. While the countries with highest LDI include Papua Guinea, Vanuatu and the Solomon Islands. Now, why is this shrink being seen? Why are the languages, the number of languages shrinking? See, the first reason why this is happening is because we want ease of communication between each other, right? We want to be easily communicate with each other, and that is why many countries, they start adopting a common language. For example, in case of India, we adopted English, which was not exactly a native language of India. We adopted English as a common language so that different parts of the country, they could communicate with each other. Because the northern parts, they might not know the Dravidian language or the Sino-Tibetan group of languages that are being spoken in northeast part of India, right? Northern part might not know these languages, southern part might not know these languages, northeastern part might not know these languages. However, English was one language because British, they extended their empire to every corner, almost every corner of India. So that is why English was one language that was kind of a common language for these regions. So India, we adopted English as a language despite English not being a native language of India. Right? So that is why many people, they start to adopt common languages for the ease of communication, and that leads to a reduction in linguistic diversity. Second issue is migration of population. If someday I migrate to another country, say Spain, most of the people, they are speaking Spanish. So eventually I will also have to learn Spanish, so that I will be able to communicate effectively with the people. I will be able to get better economic and social prospects, right? So there is a pressure to shift to the dominant language that is being spoken in any country where the migrants, they come to. So what happens in the first generation of migrants, the people, they know their native language, as well as they know the language of the country they have migrated to. So they are mostly bilingual. The second generation, the children of the first generation migrants, they might have some knowledge of the native language, but they will have exemplary knowledge of this dominant language. Why? Because their education was in this country. The third generation, they might further have lesser knowledge of the native language, and eventually the native language, it will stop existing from that chain, right? So migration is another reason. What is the impact of this? First, there is definitely a loss of cultural heritage, because a lot of cultural heritage, like many of the oral traditions, many songs, folk songs, stories, myths, poems, they are what? They are in that particular language. Once the language, it stops to exist, this knowledge, it is completely lost. This cultural heritage, it is completely lost. There is also a loss of traditional knowledge about local ecosystems of that region. For example, there is a tribe living in that particular region. This tribe, it has its own local language. In those local language, they have named the various trees, the various animals, various other plants, shrubs, herbs. So they have local names for the ecosystems, for the medicinal plants. They have various sustainable practices that are transferred from one generation to other orally. They might not have written records. So that particular knowledge is also lost. There is also an erosion of identity. When the native speakers, they stop using their own language. For example, many of the migrant children, the second generation migrants, they experience this identity crisis, where they partly know their language but not fully. They are not completely a part of that dominant country where they are living, right? They have some native parts within them, but they do not have an exact identity. Also, this also limits communication within the community. For example, this particular tribe, eventually what happens, there is a huge scale development over here. There is a huge out migration of people. Some migrated here, some here, some here, some here. So what happened? Eventually they had to learn the dominant language of the places they migrated to. Eventually they lost that language. They lost the ability even to communicate with each other. So these all are the impacts of this particular issue of languages shrinking. This is not given in the article. This we have added on our own. Now, what are the constitutional provisions for minority languages in Indian Constitution? First, we have Article 29 that protects the linguistic minorities. Any section of citizens who have a distinct language, script or culture of its own, they have a right to conserve the same. So this is a what? Fundamental right that is given by the Constitution of India. Next, Article 345, it allows a state legislature to prescribe one or more official languages for the state. So at least the regional languages, they can stay, they can be used for official purposes. Next, Article 348(1)(a), it allows the use of regional languages in the high courts as well. Lastly, Article 350(b), it establishes a special officer for linguistic minorities. This officer will be appointed by the President of India. They will investigate in the matters relating to safeguarding of the linguistic minorities in the country, and they will give a report to the President on this. And President, they will lay this report in front of the Parliament. So these are the provisions in India's Constitution. Okay. So in this particular article, we talked about the problem of shrinking languages in the world. What is the reason for this? Right? What will be the impact of it? What can be the solution? What can be the solution? What these people are doing? The Linguistic Society of America, they are trying to make audios, videos of the knowledge related to these languages, to these cultures, right? That can be one solution. These constitutional provisions, that can be another solution to protect the linguistic minorities. Apart from that, not directly related to this, but India is doing what? India has established a traditional knowledge digital library. We are digitalizing all the traditional knowledge of the various parts of the country. So that in some way can also help in conserving the knowledge related to those languages, right? Now the next article is regarding Indo-South Korea relations, or Republic of Korea. Same country, South Korea and Republic of Korea relations. Now this year we celebrate the 50 years of India-South Korea relations, the diplomatic relations. There is a huge potential for South Korea, that is the Republic of Korea. As I stated, South Korea is Republic of Korea, North Korea is Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We are talking here about South Korea or Republic of Korea, which is related to your various K-pop bands, various K-dramas. They all come from here, not here. Okay. So there is a huge potential for South Korea to emerge as an important partner for India in India's Indo-Pacific policy. We are trying to what? We are trying to reduce the hegemony of China. We are trying to ensure that China does not establish its monopoly in the Indo-Pacific region, right? This becomes also very important. Indo-South Korea relations, they also become very important in the background of the Camp David Summit. Now, what is this Camp David Summit? Camp David Accords were related to Israel, okay? Camp David Summit is different. So Camp David Summit, it was a summit, that means it was a meeting of heads of the state of USA, Japan and Republic of Korea. India was not involved over here. It was between these three countries. Now why was this very important? First of all, It strengthens the US-led alliance structure in the East Asian part of the world against Chinese hegemony. So US already has AUKUS, Australia, UK, US. We have Quad, India, Japan, US and Australia. We also have, USA also has Chip 4 alliance between Japan, US, Taiwan and South Korea. Okay. So along with this Camp David summit, this meeting of these countries, it helps in further strengthening US-led alliances in this part of the world, in the Indo-Pacific, East Asia part of the world against Chinese hegemony. It also establishes an improved role of Republic of Korea in Indo-Pacific. See, Korea and Japan, they did not have a very very good relationship with each other because of the historic atrocities that were committed by Japan on Korea during the World War II, right? But now with them coming together, what happens? USA is supporting South Korea. Now Japan is also becoming friendly with South Korea. So this establishes an improved role of South Korea in the politics or the strategic aspects of Indo-Pacific. Also, traditionally what happened, Seoul, they had a policy that they do not want to anger or offend China at any cost. Why? Because 20% of South Korean exports, they went to China. So that was bringing in a lot of money for their economy. So South Korea, they did not want to offend China at any cost. But now there has been a strategic shift. They want to dissociate economy with strategic relations. So these two, they are being separated, and South Korea, it is becoming more and more assertive. Also, South Korea, it has a keen interest in joining the Quad grouping, and maybe in the next session of Quad summit, South Korea, they might apply for a membership. Up until now, South Korea was not sure that Japan would support its membership in Quad grouping because Japan and South Korea didn't have a very cordial relationship. But after this summit, the relationship has improved and Korea is pretty sure that Japan will now support its inclusion. Lastly, there is a new foreign policy enthusiasm in Seoul. That is the capital of South Korea or Republic of Korea. They want to become a global pivotal state. So this is very much evident with improved relations with Japan and USA. They have improved their global presence. They are completely supporting Ukraine against Russia. They are supporting Ukraine with humanitarian support. So they want to become a global pivotal state. They do not just want to be a regional player. They want to become a global player. Now South Korea, it is a very, very good example regarding how to use soft power for your diplomatic purposes. They have extensively used their soft power, their music, their dramas, their language. They have extensively used that to create an influence all across the world, and now they are using that soft power influence for their hard diplomacy as well. The strategic interests as well. So this is a very good example that you can state anywhere. Okay. Now what are the opportunities for Delhi and Seoul? See, Delhi and Seoul, India and South Korea, Republic of Korea, we are very much natural partners. Why are we natural partners? Reason number one. Republic of Korea, it is located in Indo-Pacific, close to China. It is an ally of USA. India is also a neighbor of China and also a friend of USA. We'll not call ourselves openly as an ally of USA because we have kind of a non-allied stance. We are close to USA, we are close to Russia as well. But when it comes to USA versus China, we are definitely closer to China. Sorry, we are definitely closer to USA because China, it is questioning our territorial integrity, right? So both Republic of Korea as well as India, they have similar situation. Next, for both of these, rise of China and its monopoly in the Asian region, its unilateral attempt at reordering Asian security architecture, it is of a great concern. China, it is unilaterally sending out its military ships, not just in South and East China Sea, but many times in Indian Ocean as well. So this is threatening not just India but also South Korea. So we can easily come together against these threats. So basically, China is the uniting factor between India as well as South Korea. A supporting cast, a supporting act is being played by USA, which is friends with both the countries. Now, what are the potential areas for strengthened cooperation? We can have the 2+2 dialogue between India and South Korea. We already have such dialogues that have been established between India and USA, India and Japan, with Australia as well as Russia. So basically the 3 Quad countries apart from India as well as Russia. We can also explore the opportunity or possibility of a joint initiative on critical and emerging technology between South Korea, Japan, USA and India. India has recently signed such a ICET deal already with USA to work on critical and emerging technologies like nanotechnology, supercomputers, quantum computers and many other things, right? We can explore this possibility for joint South Korea, Japan, USA, India, ICET, because these countries, they are very much known for their innovation. And if India becomes a part of such a grouping, it will be very much beneficial for India. As I stated earlier with ASEAN, here also these countries, they have exemplary experience in hardware. India has an exemplary experience in software. Both can come together in collaboration for development of new technologies. Also, there can be defense cooperation. See, South Korea, it is very much willing to help India in defense needs, in its defense needs, while also following India's policy of Make in India. As a part of it, K9 Vajra, it has already been created. Now K9 Vajra, it has been created by L&T, which is an Indian company, in association with a Korean company, that is Hanwha Defense. Apart from that, the K2 Black Panther tanks, they can also be co-built by South Korean companies for Indian Army, as well as for export to third countries, for export to, apart from India and South Korea, it can be exported to third countries as well. There can also be a nuclear cooperation between the countries. How nuclear cooperation? See, since the NSG waiver to India has not been able to attract a lot of countries to establish nuclear plants. Why? Because of the strict nuclear liability laws of India, right? So in this regard, South Korea can be a good partner for us. They can be invited. They can be given a look at our nuclear liability law. They can be invited. They have already helped countries like UAE, like Saudi Arabia, like many East European countries, for establishing their civil nuclear plants. They can also help India with regards to same. So this is how India and South Korea, they can further enhance their engagement, their cooperation, and help in addressing the issues that are existing in the Indo-Pacific region. Last article of the detailed analysis is regarding the impact of RBI's Reserve Bank of India's lending guidelines. Now, what are these impacts, which will be important for your GS3 as well as for your general financial literacy? If you take a loan in the future or you have a loan right now, then this information will be important for you as well. So, the context is that on August 18th, the Reserve Bank of India, it released a guideline regarding interest rates for any loans. So it said that borrowers, they can now move from floating to fixed interest rates. What are floating and fixed interest rate? We'll take a look in the next slide. Now this particular facility, it will be available to all the existing as well as the new loans that will be furbished by the year end. What is the main intention? See, the intention is to address the grievances of the borrowers. Now what happens? First I'll tell you what is fixed and floating, then I'll tell you about the grievances of the borrowers. See, fixed interest rate, they do not change during the tenure of the loan. If your loan is for 10 years, the interest rate, fixed interest rate is say 12%. If you have taken a home loan for 10 years, interest rate is 12%. You have taken a fixed interest rate, that means it will stay 12% for the entire tenure of your loan. Okay. Next, there is a floating interest rate. Now, floating interest rate, depending upon the repo rate that is released by the RBI at periodic intervals, this floating rate will keep on changing. Okay, it will keep on changing during the 10 years. Say if you started with 10.5%, later the repo rate was changed, the floating rate, it might come down or it might go up depending upon how the repo rate is increasing or decreasing, right? So that means that floating rate, it has some sort of risk associated with it. In the positive times, you might have to give very less interest rate if the repo rates are low. In the bad times, you might have to give very high interest rate if the repo rates are increased by the Reserve Bank, right? So that is the risk associated with floating interest rates. Now, floating interest rates, to counter this risk, what do banks or lenders do? They provide these floating interest rates which are generally lower than the fixed interest rate. So if today you go to a bank to get a home loan or a student loan or any other loan, if the fixed interest rate is 12%, the floating interest rate will be say 10% or 10.5%. It will be a little lower as an incentive against the risk that is involved in the floating interest rate. Later on, maybe 5 years down the lane, your fixed interest rate will stay 12% if you took it at a fixed interest rate. But floating, it might even reach 15%, right? You never know. So that is why as an incentive against this risk, floating interest rates, they are generally lower than the fixed interest rate. But in long term, this can change as the base rate, the repo rate, it might change in the future. Another benefit or incentive associated with floating interest rate is that these rates, they do not draw a prepayment penalty. For example, your loan was for 10 years. Suddenly, at the 5th year, you get a huge bonus from your company. You get a huge bonus enough to repay the entire loan. Okay, so you go to the bank and you say, I want to repay my entire loan in the 5th year itself. If there is floating interest rate associated with your loan, then there won't be any prepayment penalty associated with the prepayment. However, if you have a fixed interest rate, in that case, you might end up giving a bigger sum compared to the sum that is left. See, say 5 lakhs were left, to be paid to the bank in the next 5 years, but you want to pay this entire 5 lakh amount today in the 5th year itself, you might have to pay 5 lakh plus a small penalty to the bank. This penalty is what? A prepayment penalty. So this does not exist in floating rate, it exists in the fixed rate. So now what is the grievance that they are talking about? See, in the fixed interest rate, the amount of money, the amount of monthly payments that you might have to give to the bank, they'll remain the same throughout the tenure. But in case of floating, the EMI, it might change depending upon the interest rate. If suddenly the interest rate, it falls from 10 to 5% or it increases to 15%, in this case the EMI amount will reduce. In this case the EMI amount will increase, right? Another way is that if you don't want to increase your EMI, you can increase the tenure of your loan. If suddenly the floating interest rate becomes 15%, earlier your tenure of the loan was 10 years, you can request the bank to increase it to 15 years so that your EMI does not change, right? So this is something, either the EMI will change or the tenure will change. So the intention of this move by the RBI is to address borrowers' grievances regarding elongation of loan tenure or increase in EMI amount if the benchmark rate increases, which leads to an increase in the floating rates. So now what will happen? Now the person, the borrower, instead of continuing with the floating rate in case such a thing happens, they will go to fixed rate, so that their amount of EMI and the loan tenure, it stays the same. So a long-term financial planning can be easily done by the borrowers. Now what has RBI instructed with regards to this? The lending entities, they will have to draft policies on this particular guideline by the RBI. Now based on this, the borrowers, they can switch. Based on these these policies, the borrowers, they can switch between floating to fixed rate. The policy, it needs to specify the number of times a borrower can switch. I have floating, I switch to fixed. Suddenly, floating rates come down, I switch back, then I switch back, then I switch back. There needs to be a number fixed up to which the borrower can do the switch. Also, the lender must communicate within this policy any kind of additional service charges or administrative charges and fees that will be incurred by the borrower if they make a switch. At the time of giving the loan, the lender should communicate very clearly the impact on the borrower if they change the regime from floating to fixed or fixed to floating. Also, the borrower will now, what was the grievance? EMI will increase or the tenure will increase. So now the borrower, they will also have an option to choose between enhancement of EMI or elongation of tenure if they want to continue with the floating rate. They can also opt for a combination of both of the things. Moreover, the lending entities, they have to provide to the borrowers in very simple and easy to understand language a statement at the end of every quarter. Now, what will this statement include? It will include the amount of principal and interest that has been recovered by the lender from the borrower, the amount of EMI that the borrower is paying, the number of EMIs that are left, and what is the rate, the annual rate of interest that the borrower is paying. This has to be done in a very simple and easy to understand format. This is one thing that has been specified by the Reserve Bank of India. Now, what is the benefit of this move? This is not included in the article. What are the benefits? One, RBI has come to the rescue of the borrowers. The borrowers, because the lending authorities, they'll have to communicate to the borrowers all the information before the loan is being given. Information regarding the switch, regarding any kind of fees during the switch, regarding elongation of EMI or tenure or both, whatever they want. So borrowers, they can now make better informed decisions regarding their financial aspects. Also, borrowers can better manage their long-term finances because they now have a choice to choose between fixed and floating. Also, they get to choose, if they continue with floating, they get to choose whether they want to increase their EMI amount or they want to increase the term of the loan. Also, lenders, they are allowed to charge any kind of administrative and service fees from the borrowers so that they also are not at the losing end. Also, the prepayment in case of fixed interest rates, it still has some amount of penalty associated with it. So lenders, they are also protected, and this is kind of a win-win situation. So this is about this particular article. Now we move to the prelim bites section. The first prelim bite article is how African Union is set to join G20. The Sherpas of the G20, the Sherpas, which are the representatives of the heads of the state, they have reached a deal regarding inclusion of African Union. So African Union, it is a 55-member union of African states. It will be joining as the second regional body member. What was the first regional body member? European Union. So right now we have 19 countries plus European Union. Now we'll have 19 countries plus European Union and African Union. However, it is unclear if this will lead to renaming of G20 to G21. That is unclear. That will be decided between 8th to 10th September. A little fact about African Union. See, it is a successor organization to an earlier existing organization, the Organization of African Unity, which existed between 1963 to 1999. In 1999, there was a Sirte Declaration by the OAU, Organization of African Unity States, to establish an African Union. So, African Union was finally established in 2002 in Durban in South Africa. The headquarters of African Union, it is located at Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. The aim of African Union is to promote unity and solidarity of the African states, to spur or improve economic development of Africa and promote international cooperation. Okay, so it is a collaborative. So instead of dealing with big powers single-handedly, all the African countries, they have now come together, and as a union, they will be dealing with the various countries to provide them a balance of power. About G20, now this becomes very important for your mains perspective as well, because India is the host of G20, the president. G20 was founded in 1999 after the Asian financial crisis. You know Asian tigers? They started experience a financial crisis which culminated in the Asian financial crisis of 1999. Because of this, there came G20. The initial goal of G20 was that it was a forum for the finance ministers as well as the central bank governors to discuss global economic and financial issue. It was just focused on this thing. Later on came another crisis, a global crisis in the year 2008. During this global crisis, the status of G20 was elevated from just being a platform for the finance ministers as well as central bank governors to a platform for the heads of the state. So it was elevated to the level of head of the state, where the heads of the state, they'll come together and discuss regarding the various challenges, especially regarding to international economic cooperation. What are the members? In South America, we have Argentina and Brazil. In North America, we have USA, Canada and Mexico. In Europe, we have France, Germany, Italy. Russia, Turkey, UK and European Union. In Africa, we only have South Africa right now. Okay. Now, with the inclusion of AU, that will also be included once it is officially announced. In Asia, we have China, India, Indonesia, Japan, Republic of Korea or South Korea, and Saudi Arabia. And we have Australia from Australia and Oceania group. Now, there are two tracks associated with G20. You must be hearing about Sherpa track. What is Sherpa track? See, the first track is finance track relating to original goal of G20, that was financial cooperation by meeting of finance ministers as well as central bank governors. So under finance track, it is led by finance ministers and central bank governors. The second is Sherpa track, which is led by Sherpas. Who are Sherpas? They are the representatives of the heads of the state. They come together and talk and try to come on a consensus for various issues which are finally published as a declaration at the end of the G20. In addition to these two major groups, two major tracks, there are certain other engagement tracks to bring together the civil society, parliamentarians, think tanks, women, youth, labor, businesses, etc. of the G20 countries. You must be hearing about W20, women of the G20, youth 20, business 20, and so on, other meetings that are going on in various places or in India for the past few months. Please note that G20 does not have a permanent secretariat. The presidency of G20, which currently is India, it is supported by a troika. Troika is 3. So this troika includes the previous presidency, the current presidency, and the incoming presidency. This time, what is the troika? Previous president, Indonesia, current India, and the incoming Brazil. So this is the troika for the current presidency of India, which is supporting India in conducting the G20. The next one, the next article is regarding Black Sea Grain Initiative, which is also known as Initiative on Safe Transportation of Grain and Foodstuffs from Ukrainian ports. Now, it was signed first time in 2022 on 22nd July in Istanbul, which is the capital of Turkey. Now, the signing parties included definitely Ukraine, also Turkey, Russia, as well as United Nations. Now, this particular initiative, it allowed exports from Ukraine of grains, foodstuff, fertilizers like ammonia through 3 ports of Ukraine. What 3 ports? Kornomorsk, Odessa, and Yuzhny, which is also known as Pivdeni, to the rest of the world, okay, through the Black Sea. So this was the purpose. See what happened once Russia attacked Ukraine in February 2022. There were a lot of stocks of grains and other foodstuff that were lying in Ukraine, that were getting rotten because they were not able to export them to the rest of the world. Also, Ukraine was one of the biggest wheat exporters of the world. So that was causing what? That was causing an increase in food prices all across the world. Now, apart from this increase in food prices, there was also an increase in what? Fuel prices across the world. This led to many countries which were almost at the verge of defaulting because of these huge prices. Many people, they were experiencing famines. So to counter all this, Black Sea Grain Initiative, it was adopted. It was implemented through a joint coordination center which included representatives of Ukraine, Russia, Turkey as well as United Nations. Now, according to this particular deal that was signed in July 2022, the initiative, it could be extended after 120 days of signing if the parties agree. So, it was extended after 120 days of this date. It was extended once. The second time it was to be extended in July 2023, but it was not. So it lapsed on 17 July 2023. Now during the G20 summit, the representatives of Turkey, European Union, United Nations as well as Russia, they will again come together and they'll try to revive this particular deal, which was cancelled by Russia because Russia thought that the Western nations, they were not fulfilling their promises that were promised to them during this deal. The last one is heat index. What is heat index? Why is it important to measure heat index? Now, heat index is also known as apparent temperature. If you check your weather apps on your phone, you have a normal temperature and below that it's written feels like. So sometimes your temperature at your location might be say 30 degrees, but it feels like say 35 degrees. So what is this feels like temperature and why is it in news? It is in news because Iran experienced an extreme heat event where the heat index or the feels like temperature, it reached 70 degrees in August. So this led to public holidays in Iran to prevent any kind of adverse impact on human health. Now what is this? What is the normal temperature? What is the feels like temperature? Normal temperature is just the temperature of the air around you. Feels like temperature is the temperature that you are feeling, that the humans are feeling. So this is determined by a complex calculation which was developed in 1979 by Dr. Robert Stedman. This calculation involves air temperature, the normal temperature as well as relative humidity. Why is humidity included? Because humid air, it can feel hotter to humans. Why is it that? Because high humidity, it leads to heat stress. Why? Because our body is unable to cool itself. How does our body cool itself? We sweat. This sweat gets evaporated and this leads to cooling down of our body. Now, if there is a lot of humidity in the air, what will happen? The sweat on our body, it will not get evaporated because the air is already kind of saturated with water. So more water it cannot absorb. So the sweat won't get evaporated. So that will lead to what? That will lead to our body's inability to cool itself, leading to heat stress in our body, right? So that is why when there is high humidity, apart from high air temperature, we feel that the temperature is even higher than what is being stated. So humidity is generally higher during the heat waves. A heat index value of 67 degrees or above. Iran experienced what? A 70 degree value. If the heat index goes 67 degree or above, it can be extremely dangerous. It can cause a lot of fatigue, heat stress, strokes to the humans. So that is why knowledge of heat index is also very much important apart from the knowledge of normal temperature, normal air temperature around us. Okay, so with that we come to an end to this session. Now the mains practice questions. There are two questions. First is, ASEAN and India need to strengthen their cooperation not just in terms of economic engagement but also in other fields. In this background, throw a light on the 12-point proposal for Indo-ASEAN cooperation and its benefits. You can mention that during the Indonesia summit of India and ASEAN, this proposal was given by our Prime Minister with regards to improving our cooperation not just in fields of economics but also in fields of social issues, environment and strategy. You can state the various points, the benefits associated with the point. The second question is, when a language goes extinct, it strips humanity of a part of its history. Elaborate with the status of linguistic extinction in the world. You can give the status that was given in the Economic Journal, the Linguistic Diversity Index. You can mention that how language is important for conserving of culture as well, conserving of a lot of traditional knowledge. If this if the language it goes extinct, then all this is lost. So that is why we need to have measures to record all this knowledge before the language goes extinct. We need to have develop a written script for languages so that once they are lost, they can be revived in the future. So you can end your answer with this particular aspect. And with that, we come to an end to today's session. I hope you were able to understand all the topics. So thank you very much, and do not forget to attempt all these questions. So thank you very much and have a very good day ahead.